13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to another episode of 13 Questions. This time we have with us Adam Darkley, but before we get into the interview section, I have with me, as always, Adam Loyal. Adam, how are you?
Hey, Bill, how are you?
Wonderful. Adam Darkley connected with the show via Instagram, and I've been following him on YouTube. They've been coming out with a new series. It's going wonderfully. It's all about magic. Adam and his husband practice magic and offer their magical services on the internet. So all the links will be in the description below. It's definitely some interesting things and modalities to check into and learn more about, and possibly implement if you're interested in something like that. So it was a really great interview. And before we get into that, we do have our gratitude jingle that we like to do in the intros of each show. Adam, do you have that? There.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
Yay, we made it back to the gratitude jingle. I love this segment of the show. My gratitude actually kind of ties in with...
Is the gratitude jingle? Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, mine has to do with time, I guess, because which is funny because we get into that towards the end of the interview portion, so it's kind of like looping two ends back together, which is there's a time pun in there somewhere. So with that being said, I am grateful for meditation. Specifically, there's a guided meditation that I've been using called the Twin Hearts meditation by Master Cho. There's an abridged version I found on Spotify. It's like 20 minutes long, and it's something I've been trying to implement more of in my life, and I've found that one particularly helpful. So in case anybody else is looking to do the same and only wants to spend 20 minutes in meditation as opposed to hours or whatever, which is a misconception because I don't think that you have to spend hours in meditation, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, my gratitude is the Twin Hearts meditation by Master Cho. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes for that, just for ease of access for our listeners. But yeah, what did you have in mind for your gratitude?
Mine is very simple. It's people. When you listen to the interview, I'm pretty much silent the whole thing. I've been fighting a migraine, and this episode would not have happened without Bill. And it's wonderful being able to team with people where you can, you just, you make up when others can't and go forward. And it's just a very beautiful thing. So, my gratitude is people, and what we can do for each other.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? We're all about collaborating here on 13 Questions, and working together. We have to do that in order to have a bright and happy future. Collaboration, not competition. So, with that being said, if you are looking for help in collaborating to get a specific aim or something accomplished in your life, and you want some additional assistance, definitely check out Adam Darkley's services. And well, with that, I guess we'll just get right into the interview. This is 13 Questions with Adam Darkley. Question number 1. What was the best advice ever given to you? Would you modify it at all today?
So I would say, me personally, some of the best advice that I've ever been given was from my grandpa. My grandpa bailed, and this is something that he told me a lot throughout my childhood, but it's something that's really stuck with me. And he literally, this basically the saying or the advice is, and our family name on his side is Beld, and he said, "Belds don't have quit in their vocabulary." And so, it may seem small, but like that's something that kind of even from like 5 or 6 kind of carried on. And so those moments in life where I really just kind of wanted to break down or give up, I always kind of hold on to that. And just kind of like, even in my character and how I think, just like, well, it's not really like, he would also say like quitting's not an option kind of thing, like about specific, things in life. So he was really big on like not giving up and giving in and always being victorious. So
Yeah, that's a huge leadership quality, the not giving up, like not quitting. I remember like I had a 6th grade math teacher that would always congratulate me for correcting my math homework and turning it in. And she would say something along the lines of, "You're setting, being a leader by doing this." And I was like, "I just want 80% on my math quiz." I didn't understand what she was getting at the time, but the whole not quitting is definitely, picking yourself back up, right? It's not how many times you fall, it's like how many times you get back up, right?
definitely, yeah.
Question number 2. What do you willfully ignore?
It's a really good question. I was thinking about this like before, and I would say like, as far as like what I ignore, probably not very much. I feel like I'm in some ways really hypersensitive. And the way my mind works, I kind of pick up and try to analyze everything. So I feel like there's not much that I could, even if I wanted to. So I guess it's kind of like the opposite of that question, and of not being able to actually like just like put something down and ignore something. There are definitely many things that I would like to ignore in our world today, like white supremacy and fascism and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's not a common answer that we've had on the show before, so it's definitely a different perspective. There's certainly a lot going on, especially nowadays. So it's kind of important to keep your, I don't know, keep a hand in each bucket. Is that even a term? I don't even know.
Yeah. Sometimes it can feel like it would be awesome to just like buy an island and disappear forever. But, I feel like, many people have done that kind of thing, and tried to kind of ignore certain things, but it never seems to quite work out. It kind of always throws itself back into our face. So.
It's especially hard with the internet and like how connected everything is nowadays. It's hard to, people that do that, you don't hear about them, right?
Yeah.
Question number 3. What book has been most influential on your life and why?
There's definitely a ton, occult and otherwise. But I would say one book that's kind of stuck with me was a book that I read probably about 10 or 11 years ago. It's by an anthropologist and a mentor and an author, and he has a lot of stuff, many titles, I guess, but his name's Alberto Villoldo. And so the book name is Shaman, Healer, Sage, and he was essentially an anthropologist that back in like the 70s, he went to, Peru and began meeting with, some of the Jivaro and some of the tribes there, and actually like kind of trying to look at it from, their magical practices and their, like actually like the faith healing and all these things that, he had heard over time, and that, that many people have heard about, like ways of like folk healing and basically shamanic healing. But he began there as like as a scientist, and it essentially became like a healer over time in that way. But some of the teachings in that book, there's like rites of passage, like ways that you can quite literally help someone, because there is kind of a phenomenon where spirits do get either trapped in the body, or if the body decays or certain things happen, especially on an energetic level, like they can have trouble kind of like disconnecting from the body as they're trying to pass on into the spirit world. And so there are like practices in there and ways of kind of like basically rites of passage and rites of death and all these different things. And so that was definitely a book that has kind of stuck with me. Some of the teachings, learning, about certain techniques, like essentially that, there's like a billion and one strands that kind of not connect us to everything on kind of every level, even energetically. And there's a technique that he actually shares where you can feel that connection almost like a tree's roots, like as you connect it to others. And it's cool knowing that mycelium actually do share like miles wide and beyond like connections in that level. And so, there's many things like that that were really life changing, that are definitely inspiring too. It's a great book.
Did that book touch on any like initiations into adulthood at all? Like,
yeah, and that's kind of a part I guess I didn't think of, but a big part of it is really initiation and on every level, and essentially sharing ways to begin to kind of constructively let your life fall apart. When we come to these points in life, even beyond, like, from childhood to adulthood to elder and death and beyond, we have these situations in life that come up that, for whatever reason, astrologically, maybe it's a belief that we hold that just doesn't ring true, or something going on another level that kind of has things replay out almost year by year to year, sometimes even for some people on the same date. And so, things like that can really kind of hinder people. But what I found in even my work in ceremonial magic and hoodoo and folk magic and work that I do now with clients is, we end up being like such a barrier to ourselves, because we're not able to, even when people say, oh, I'm ready to move on from this, I'm tired. Someone's tired of being like impoverished or being in this situation, this, and even when they make changes and even get beyond that, they're still holding on to that initial narrative or that identity from before that was never shifted and changed. And so, and that's one of many ways and examples that initiation, it's like the universe trying to push us to move on and beyond and transform. And it's like, if we don't do that, it kind of does come back around. And I feel like maybe that's what some people may experience with like Saturn returns and things like that. But initiation is definitely necessary, and it's definitely an underrated or undervalued and even almost non-existent aspect of our culture, at least in the West, unless someone's a part of like a certain religion or otherwise. So those things are really really important.
so do you find that its initiation is more of getting out of your own way? Is that an appropriate? Would that be an appropriate, I don't know, description?
Not at all. I think it can mean many things in many ways, many levels. It really it can be, anything from kind of a life transition, like a big life change, to where in my belief, in my practice, in my work, as I was saying before, from birth to death, we actually go through these big life changes. But in our modern society, we don't have, or at least it's not more openly accepted to have certain rites of passage, like is, from like the renaming past, say, like, in Judaism or other religions or other or belief systems, people may actually take like a new name at some point and, at a certain age. And that's just one of many examples. But I find, there are ways in essentially, ritually or otherwise of initiating ourselves. And it's not really like, someone paying $5,000 flying to Haiti and getting scratched into voodoo or anything like that. It's more so just like utilizing like the elements of fire and otherwise, and ways of, beyond just change, but transforming, like, say, people who are dealing with like addiction, obsessions, sicknesses, like life-threatening, altering things, that it's not actually a sickness. It actually has a root in spirit and on an energetic level that begins to manifest physically. And so, it's kind of like some people, they have like a physical sickness of cancer, but some people have a spiritual sickness of cancer. And so they'll get that removed physically, and over time it comes back. There are like shamanic, certain practices and ways of extracting or completely like depossessing and basically shifting things on a whole other level to kind of end that. And essentially that person, they initiate, they lay that part of them to rest, or that aspect or that old narrative, and then they're able to kind of like, kind of embody a whole new life, a new person, new self.
So it sounds like this can be done at any point in time then. Like while there are certain points, like you were saying, like the renaming ceremony, like there's certain dates of initiation that are important along the lifeline, but there's also it can be done at any time that it's needed then too, right?
Yeah, and I feel like it happens many times over life too. And sometimes even when we like, it's like kind of like, something's blatant in our face, and it's kind of like the next path, we take this other thing and then it keeps coming back. It keeps trying to make itself prevalent in our life. And but I feel it all, it's obviously so much more than we may even have time here for today, but it's one of those things, like I was saying, where we don't really have this in our society where you can, at least it's obviously, spirituality, is becoming more and more openly accepted, but, it's not like you can always go to someone and just be like, help me fix my life. But yeah, it's, initiation to me is many things on many levels. And sometimes it can be straight up psychologically and things that we've held on, like I said, narratives and things that we were told as a child through, through times of abuse and even trauma that people have experienced where they have phobias and stuff. It's like we can actually heal and initiate and use like healing or straight up sorcery to change that completely.
Do you have an example of what that would look like off the top of your head? Like for the sorcery aspect mainly is what I'm
there's definitely a number of ways. It's something that I've come to, and I've had many great mentors and teachers, so I can never take, credit for the, all that has been shared and all the teachings and everything, but it's something I personally come to call the magical transformation. In hoodoo and root work and kind of at least in the modern world as well. Some people do magic, or they go to, somebody who's a worker, somebody who does perform magic professionally, for money or otherwise. And for some people that may fix things, but for many people, I find in my work with thousands of clients over the years is that that's often just kind of like the tip of the iceberg. And many times that one issue that, the one thing that they came to me for was essentially just one thing that revealed multiple other things. And so, I, through my own work and my own practice and what I've taught and what I've seen, over the years and seen and actually applied to like myself too, is, like I said, what I call the magical transformation. And so that's taking that just simple spell work to the next level where you're quite literally, it's a bit of psychotherapy. It's a bit of healing as well. It's a bit of ritual magic. It's a bit of quote unquote shadow work. And quite literally getting to the core of your spirit, of your being and beyond, and really being able to see into like the story that you came into this world and the identity and the name, and say if somebody grew up in a certain life or under a certain religion or something that was really life-threatening or traumatic or otherwise for them, and they carried that on. It's like there are ways that I'm able to help my clients and help people basically lay that to rest, to heal through, shamanic healing, through, working with with the stars and planetary magic and astrological magic, and basically helping them in that way initiate their life to take up a new narrative and even to kind of rewire their mind from that old kind of outdated, essentially a way of thinking that no longer serves the life that they desire to live, the person they desire to be, and quite literally can even be traumatizing to continue to carry that when it's not true to their core. But essentially helping someone move through that entire phase until it's not merely just a temporary change. It's a life transformation that they carry forward with them. And I've done that with people on multiple levels, like using different, like say, like if somebody's like addicted to like tobacco, using like a certain it's something that I've learned from different indigenous tribes, but there are other cultures that are other magical systems and healing systems that use it. But there are ways of like trapping the spirit of, say, addiction or sickness or different spirits that it can be connected to and beyond, and quite literally removing them from that person and that influence out of their lives. And it can be almost like a depossession in that way too. But there are certain spirits and powers that are connected to certain things like that, or if it's not like the spirit of tobacco specifically, it's like the addiction of a spirit of addiction connected to it too. So yeah, that's just one of many ways that I've found to be really successful. And of course, that's just kind of like a little peek into it, but it's really fun work. I can say that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're helping people rewire their I don't know, subconscious belief systems until the benefit that you're aiming for is no longer like something until it becomes like more automatic, until built in, right? So yeah, and then I love it. Yeah, it's so cool. And then it sounds like you work with people all the way until the end, right? Until it is automatic, like I was saying.
Yeah. And that's why I have a big focus on like the people that I do work with through Devil's Conjure is that they're committed and kind of ready to invest in moving forward, because I work with so many people now and have so many other things going on that the people that I work with, I'm really serious about like our work together and wanting to see them like to exceed their expectations and beyond. So it's really important for me that they're also kind of ready to take that leap too. And obviously, if you're in a scary situation or life threatening or otherwise, you're kind of maybe not thinking clearly or otherwise, but kind of hold like a general expectation, kind of like somebody would of me. So
question number 4. What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think that it's important?
It's a good question. I think one thing, like one, it's definitely a good question because there's probably like multiple things like all together. But I think one thing that's kind of always been important to me is kind of like family and like protecting family and trying to kind of like hold that balance. Just because I've had a lot of times in like in the past, and even when I was younger, where family life and things were kind of all over the place and unstable. And so I would say like personally in my own life, that's something that is kind of really important, is just kind of like taking care of the home, like of my home and my family and protecting everyone and just kind of like keeping things as balanced as I can.
Yeah.
It's obviously very occult related, but.
Well, I mean, family first. You want to protect those that that you care about. So, I mean, even I know that in Masonic lodges, when they're talking about your obligations and what you are expected to do, that they always emphasize that if you have stuff at home that needs to be addressed, don't sacrifice that in order to come to lodge or whatever. So, definitely good principle, in my opinion. Question 5. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
I would definitely probably say my best friend obviously would be like my husband, but yeah, I would definitely say it would probably be like balance or something to that degree. Beyond just like all the business stuff and that we have going on, like even like personally and in myself and kind of like the pendulum swing, like we call it, where, to one extreme or the other, just kind of like balance in general, I feel like in life and probably, it's probably something we both tell each other, but like probably just like learning to chill like a lot more, because I not really like as much high strung, but I think I just get kind of like super focused sometimes. And so, yeah, just some basic stuff, I guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a constant struggle for everyone. While we're here anyway, in this incarnation, is the whole balance, maintaining balance in the middle path. And I find that I often get stuck in my head, and stuck on the upper chakras and that whole loop. So I could definitely relate trying to relax a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, it can be hard to kind of power down when we're all like, seems like we're always like kind of overstimulated, and there's so much going on that we're made to feel responsible for, like straws and everything. And it's kind of like, well, maybe if they quit making them, people wouldn't use straws anymore. There's certain things like that. I'm like, well, like all these huge corporations that are doing it are putting it back on the people. And it's like, well, maybe just quit mass producing trash made out of plastic.
Going back to the whole balance thing, it's be the change you want to see. So
Exactly.
Question number 6. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I think just like one of the biggest things in my life and in my world, something that I felt I fought for many years until I just realized that I in my own way had to kind of be was just kind of like liberation and freedom. And that's kind of like a thing, something like a running thing. That's something that's a big part of not only my spiritual work, but just kind of in life in general is just that feeling and the actual place of being free in yourself and in your life and stuff. And so I think that's something that is a constant, is just constantly figuring out ways to feel more free and to feel kind of more secure and to kind of and kind of sit and enjoy that feeling too, because there were times obviously in my childhood and other times where I didn't have that stability. And so having that feeling now and it being kind of in my control and stuff is a great feeling. It's definitely something that gets me going and kind of pushes me farther, because I kind of want to see, just how great things can get. So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, freedom to me speaks of being, sovereignty and being empowered. And when you're, discover empowerment, then, you want, like you were saying, you want to, your cup overfloweth, so to speak, and you want to pass it on to other people and see how far can we take this thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Question number 7. What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
It's definitely a good question. Something, it was something that happened when I was like 3 years old. So it's one of many things, obviously, but I'm not a lot of listeners, a lot of people, you guys might remember, like in malls, they still kind of have them in some places, but they have those jewelry cases they're kind of circular and they spin. And I used to live with my grandma when I was younger, and so she would always take me everywhere. And one time we were in the mall, and we were in like this one place that was like a nice jewelry store in the mall, and I spun one of those things so fast that it like flew off the counter and like landed on the ground and it just like kind of burst everywhere. And that's something I laugh about now, but that was definitely one of those times where I just felt like, thinking back, and obviously I was very young, so it was a very young memory, but thinking back, as a kid, I just knew I was going to like die or something.
That must have been, that must have been, dreadful. Just that expensive jewelry on the floor.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It's like playing tag in a crystal store or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Question number 8. What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it, if you have?
I'd say one of my. Did you say the greatest fear or one of my greatest? I guess it's cool either way.
Your greatest. What is your? So I guess it would be the greatest fear.
Sure. I guess my greatest fear that I can think of to date is that something that I've already overcame was just honestly the fear of the dark. I was a 90s kid, so I grew up to some pretty awful like 90s horror movies and even like 70s and 80s, and so through that and a powerful imagination, I used to be like debilitatingly afraid of the dark, so much so that I would like when we had a house that had a long hallway to my bedroom, I would like run from like one side of the house through the hallway, like to get to my room. And something that, and it obviously, had a spiritual connection even back then. But, I would have this one shade spirit that even would visit me in the night, and didn't realize until, even just a few years ago that spirit was the spirit of the dead, like a shade, someone connected, to one of my ancestors. But yeah, that was one fear that definitely was pretty awful, and something that I even had like a fear of the darkness up until probably about 19. And then obviously as I continued on my work and my path, now I'm like, well, now I know what's in the dark or who's there or whatever. So I think probably more likely, I was sensing things that I wasn't, fully aware of too. So.
Do you think that that's more common than is reported, like as far as like little children being the whole phenomenon of being afraid of the dark? Because that was definitely something that I had. I had a nightlight growing up and whatnot, and I remember running up out of the dark basements after the lights got turned off. because something was down there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably is pretty common, and and I think a lot of children clearly are having like magical experiences or horrific experiences, and so even in like the old world, and of course, like folk tales, fairy tales, folklore, and even in the ancient world, they were hanging up bundles of specific roots or herbs like above a child's bed to keep night hags away, because children were seeing like witches that were flying in their windows trying to like take them away, and or goblins that were trying to like eat their feet, or so there I think there's definitely something there. And for me, I think it was that I was definitely sensing something of super hyper imagination, to the point like of seeing like a shirt in the dark that looks like someone standing there, or something. So I think it's definitely a mixture of things, and like I said, really awful like horror movies like Freddy and Jason and all those.
Yeah, I didn't get too much into the horror genre. I remember that my parents, we went to go see The Creature of the Black Lagoon, and it was in this black and old timey theater. I couldn't even sit through the whole movie. I was young though, like really young, and they had to take me out. That freaked me out when I was younger. And then the other one that sounds silly, but was Ernest Scared Stupid, where the people get turned into like trolls or stone or something. Those two really messed me up.
Yeah, the Ernest movies are pretty crazy.
Yeah. Question number 9. What is your greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
I would say probably definitely my greatest driving force in life would be my husband, and just kind of like all of our goals and desires, and many things that we've achieved, and kind of where we're going, and honestly, just kind of from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, I'm just thinking and planning and working, and constantly, kind of like I said earlier, juggling, things, and just kind of like putting as much momentum and will behind our endeavors. So
yeah, that's awesome. Waking up every day inspired and looking forward to what you do. Like that's not everybody can say that. And I guess we haven't really gotten too much officially into it, right? Up until now. But you guys, did you want to kind of tell the listeners what services you offer? We connected through Instagram, so I've seen a little bit of your posts, and I've been following you on YouTube. You started a new series recently, so did you kind of want to explain what to the listeners what you wake up inspired to do every day?
Cool. And so I, Adam Darkley, and my husband Darian Darkley, we're the CEOs of Darkley's Inc. And so we have about 4 or 5 businesses that fall under that flag, and another or 2 coming like later in the year and in the future. And so one of those businesses is Devil's Conjure, which is essentially Devil's Conjure is world renowned for ritual magic, like spell work and divination, and also like magical products. And what I basically say is Devil's Conjure is, we are purveyors of sorceress services and products connected to the powers of heaven and hell. And so I offer custom spell work, and I have a service through Devil's Conjure, which you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and beyond. But I have a service that's called the Sorcerer Hire Monthly service. Basically, I have monthly subscription, a 30-day service that gives clients access to all of my services for one fee. And that's a big service that's just kind of taken off, and that's part of like the magical transformation. And some of what I was mentioning earlier, a lot of that is kind of hand in hand with that work and working one-on-one with clients, we week. And then, as you mentioned, our show, Dark Press presents Speak of the Devil. It's the show, we essentially call it a laid-back magical chat about the occult, cryptids, taboo topics and all that fun stuff. So that's a show that my husband Darian and I, that we are having a lot of fun making those and putting those out on YouTube. And then, of course, upcoming later in the year in October, we're launching our school, Darkley's School of Witchcraft, and our school store, Darkley's Curiosities, which was actually the original store even before Devil's Conjure. So a lot of new, a lot of old, a lot of changes, and a lot lot of offerings and services and all that stuff too. So
Wow, yeah, you got a lot of irons in the fire. That's super
Mhm.
exciting.
Mhm.
All the links will be in the show notes. I'll put those in there so the listeners can can find you.
Cool, that's awesome.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying the YouTube series. I've caught the first episode and I've been following it since. And super interesting topics. You answer questions from the audience questions, right? Or
Yeah. People send in messages or like email us like what they'd like us to answer and things like that.
yeah, and it's the length. I really enjoy the episode lengths. They're not very long, so it's perfect for if you had a busy day or whatever. So,
Mhm.
all right, moving on to question 10. Who are or were your role models and why?
I would say definitely personally, one of my biggest role models, especially as a child, has been my grandfather. Once again, my grandpa Beld. He's especially as a kid, he's just always kind of seemed legendary to me. He was a Coast Guard. He was like in the Navy. He was like a doctor, and there's other things that I know about that I can't really mention just because that he was a part of it and stuff like that. But he has like multiple PhDs and like multiple masters, and he's just always somebody that just kind of seemed larger than life. He always has like these big wild stories and things that he's told me, like from when he was stationed in like Japan and Germany and all these other things. Like he's also the one of the main people that as a child would share like a lot of our like indigenous heritage from like his side of the family and people that he had met and things like that. So he's definitely been like kind of a lifelong inspiration so far, and definitely someone that I kind of share that inspiration with others too. So
That's great to hear. One of the motifs, I guess, one of the driving motifs when Darren Grimes put together the show, who he's the kind of his brainchild. He's a host of the Grammarica show podcast, but one of the things that we wanted to kind of pay homage to was that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, and that the wisdom that we have today is passed down to us by our elders. So in doing 13 questions, one of the things that we kind of want to pay our respects to and give the people opportunity to go out and have these conversations with their elders that they respect and kind of memorialize that into whatever the internet is going to become, right? So I definitely, the whole ancestor thing is super interesting to me. Does that how often does that come up in your work? Like, do you find like help from your clients passed on, the ones on the other side very often?
So I kind of bridge heaven and hell, ceremonial magic, folk magic. I worked a ancestor altar for a number of years, and I still have specific materia and work with certain powers that kind of keep me close to them, and I receive visions or certain dreams and things like that. But I would say that the client's ancestors definitely come forward. I used to do medium readings a lot more until I had a string of people who really didn't like what their ancestors had to say about the one thing that they really wanted some truth about, and they expected them to answer. It's essentially a situation where they want to hear something really nice from like this dead ancestor who really hated them, and they weren't a big fan of them in life and things like that. They wanted kind of a closure, and it's obviously a whole nother topic and situation. But I would say that ancestors definitely come forward for clients, and in my work, they definitely still play like a pretty big role. I find for clients that it seems like a lot of times they're more present when most needed, and they're always there, obviously. But like typically ancestors seem to come up a whole lot in readings. That's a portion of Bevel's Conjure, as well as spell work and products. I also offer divination and card readings, and ancestors definitely come forward with more to say than we typically have time for at times.
So do you have any like beginners tips and tricks for anybody looking to kind of establish more of an altar to be more methodical about ancestor honoring or trying to connect with them? Like any beginners, like where do you, like 101 trips, I guess?
Sure. And so for me, that always begins with genealogy, and of course, going to, one big thing, my grandparents on both sides, everyone is a big storyteller. Everyone has stories about the family, and I think that's something that's really important. Is not only still holding our elders that are alive, dear, but going to them, because like my grandpa Martin, before he died, it's like I could go to him and he would tell me about like great, he would tell me stories that like his parents, may have not even heard, but stuff that he was told by his grandparents. And like, so, I feel like going to your elders that are still alive and like connecting with them and asking and showing interest in like your family line, any kind of weird aunt that was probably a witch or this or that, because, she was called a poisoner or whatever, like a witch when I was a kid. But the more people I talked about, it was eventually, I had this aunt that, like I said, she was said to be like a poisoner or like a kind of a witch, but she was apparently like like kind of a healer. And in the community and where she lived, she kind of helped people out. And so, but, I find that, there's so many stories and so much that's said that we probably heard as kids and forgot, or we're told, oh, that's nothing or whatever. And so just the living people, have more to say about the dead, sometimes than we could find. But genealogy, as I said, and then, something very simple, and obviously having practices of discernment, divination, anytime you're working in any of this, to clarify that who you're calling forth is that power or spirit or ancestor. I personally would always recommend somebody work with a power like Hermes or Akate or Cyprian, Saint Cyprian of Antioch for some, to kind of ferry the dead and act as an intercessor or intermediary, just because death work and all, it can become kind of shady, especially depending on where you live, the wandering dead, restless dead, spirits like that it can be pretty malefic and pretty scary in some ways. But yeah, just honestly researching. And then once you get like a keener idea, asking ancestors to begin to share, wisdom and dreams, or to, make, and I don't typically say like, oh, asking them to make themselves more present in your life, because I feel like you definitely want to have boundaries with the dead, and obviously like, having a boveda or an altar set up, just having like a cup of water and a white candle lit, burned in their honor is something that's great. So that's some definitely like some simple things. Like I said, you can set up like on a clean table, a white cloth, a fresh cup of water, even from the tap, and a candle anointed, with like, in Devil's Conjure, we sell a Beyond the Veil oil, but you can even anoint a candle with olive oil, and just essentially, ask your ancestors who do wish you well and who do have wisdom or guidance, who may, want to kind of aid you in your life and your path, to come forward. The reason I say that too is because we have some people have ancestors who probably aren't in that great of state, depending on your belief or otherwise, or somebody's belief or otherwise. Essentially, some ancestors aren't too happy, or they're not in a great place, and so they need a little exaltation or other work. But yeah, there's, the dead are some of our greatest allies. It's said that, they're kind of just right on the other side. So I feel like we have a lot to gain from those that sometimes in this world we're too quick to forget. So
yeah, it's always been a topic that's super interesting to me. And I don't know if that's because I grew up in the Catholic Church, grew up out of, or whatever, how you want to say that. But I know that there's the saints, they're, the communion of saints and the economy of salvation, how they talk about this kind of like cycle of like helping the dead people are helping us, and we're helping the dead people all get to heaven. And I know that there's parallels that in hoodoo or voodoo, that Catholicism is mixed in there and working with the dead. So like, can you speak to that at all, as far as like the crossovers, or maybe Saint Cyprian in particular? Because I think I've heard about this character before, but I just can't remember in what context.
You mean with Cyprian, or
yeah, and then working with dead people in general, and maybe specifically in relation to like the ones that are called saints.
Mm-hmm. So I think in one way or another that and this is gonna be what it is. But I think in one way or another that some of the saints are people that the church killed and then tried to exalt. And I think there's kind of multiple things around that, but I think it was people that were pagans or otherwise that were, or people that were murdered, and then they tried to saint them in some way or another and change that story. I think there's far more about all that than, there's a lot like going on all that. But I feel like the saints are definitely interesting characters, but I don't always experience them in some of the same ways that even some people that have taught me about, working with, say, like saints or intercessory spirits like the saints. So I feel like it's kind of like a tricky thing for me because I'm kind of back and forth. I've worked with, I grew up Southern Baptist and Catholic, and even one side of the family was even Methodist. And so kind of grew up around all that, but very quickly kind of like stepped away from that as I went into my teens and beyond. But I feel like, there's definitely shared cosmology. I feel like some of the dead like definitely have like, they definitely hold on to some of their personality when they're gone. And there's all kinds of stuff like that going on. But I kind of feel like I'm back and forth with it. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that was a great answer to your question or not, but I feel like with saints that they're kind of tricky characters because of the fact that we don't have all the answers, and things have been changed so much to benefit the church or other individuals. And so I feel like, the saints aren't exactly who they say they are, if that makes sense. Like kind of like many other powers, I feel like people want a box of gods in, or different power, these just magnanimous, like godly characters. They want to kind of like Venus. Oh, Venus is the goddess of love. It's like, well, she's one of the only goddesses that was like never like defeated. She's the goddess of gain and glamour and many, many other things. And so I feel like kind of like with the saints, where they'll be like, oh, Saint Expedite to like hasten the situation or hasten money, or if you're working with the folk saints like Santisima Muerte, like, oh, you can basically like kill somebody with her or like heal love. And it's like, yes, but I've worked with her for years, and she's far more than that, and far more than just like a kind of a death saint and stuff too, kind of like Cyprian. And I've even said things openly in groups on Facebook that I no longer am a part of, but like certain things about like the saints, like where they're like Cyprian, like to me, in my experience, he's given me visions over the years and shared other things where he's basically like, I'm not just a saint. He's like, I'm the devil and I'm God in his own, and essentially like in his own way, or the form that he takes. And so I think that's something that's really interesting to kind of take a look at, and something that I talk about a lot is not really boxing in like the saints, because I feel like they're far more. And I feel like some of them could be like old gods, kind of like the goetic spirits. Some of them could be pagan spirits. So I think it's one of those things where we need more information, and obviously it's probably individual to each person. I feel like spirit relationships kind of are always like that, where like you could meet with one saint like Saint Peter, San Pedro, and like you may have one experience, and for me it could be completely different.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge topic to get into, especially when you get into, as you brought up, the obfuscation from the church about the stories. Like they're kind of co-opting and sainting and trying to cover up, and like you don't really ever know because they're all about censorship, right? So it's hard to get information, and so it's definitely a broad subject to try to.
Kind of like the Library of Alexandria. I don't think it was ever burned. I think the church has it in its Vatican. Why would they burn one of like the greatest centers of knowledge when they were wanting to basically get a chokehold on the world?
Yeah, those archives in the basement, Vatican basement or whatever. It's one of the things I'm most curious about. Like what's down there?
Yeah, you just got to be Tom Hanks apparently to get down there. So.
Right. Question number 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
In a woman?
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay, cool. I would probably say one thing that a woman like a quality that I would value most would honestly be like a woman's voice. I would say more than anything. Beyond like things that I experienced, that my mom went through. One thing that I've experienced throughout my whole life is that, the lack of of expression, like having comfortable, safe spaces for women to just like voice, their opinions, to express their emotions, to have kind of like a say. I feel like we see that in definitely other things in the world too. But I feel like one thing is, kind of like my mom, she's definitely never afraid to kind of like voice her opinion, even if it gets her in trouble. And so that even though, it can be one way or the other, I feel like that's like a really important thing.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to express your opinion and having the structure around you in which to do so.
Hmm.
Yeah. Question number 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
So it's obviously like another like totally personal thing, but when the whole Trump era thing was going on, even like in the area where we lived, it's like the Klan was like taking over in the city in Alabama, and I grew up around all that, like in Tennessee, like out in the boons and stuff. So, but when Trump was in, and we were all this craziness, and it just basically seemed and I already feel like democracy in a lot of ways is gone if it ever was a thing, but we basically like sold all of our belongings and basically sought asylum like in another country. And so that was one of those things that it was kind of like, it felt like just like, we worked hard for everything we had and all these different things, but we felt like it was no longer a safe space, especially at that time for us to be here. So we basically tried to get the hell out and seek asylum. But that part of the work, where we were, essentially they were like, oh, it's no issue, he's no issue. And it's like, I mean, he's like a fascist. And especially like one thing with like the national parks, to whether it's like voting and all that BS, like, and beyond, like we just basically felt like our whole world was falling apart, so we had to like disappear and try to get away. And obviously that kind of fell through, so we had to come back and like claw our way back up. But I think that was one thing that at least we felt like was something at the time that nothing else made sense, and that was what did. And so that's what we did.
Yeah, it's so weird that the dichotomy within the country. You said like it was like moving to a different country, like the way that the states are laid out and like the demographics across all 50 of them, like it's in the stark differences depending on like the area that you're living in. Like you're in the Bible Belt, right? So you're gonna get all that flavor down there, I guess is the best way to put it, as opposed to like being on the coasts or whatnot, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was like we were, and everyone's like, well, if one state's one way, move elsewhere. And I'm like, well, I've lived in most southern states and been to many other and pretty much all other northern states, and with all the like extremists like Trump is, and just all the radicalism going on, it was like, well, it didn't feel like anywhere was really safe. And it's like, well, I'm not really going to uproot just to move somewhere else that could be detrimental as well. And all these other countries, were being really weird about things too at the time. And like Canada is like pretty much at that time, if you showed up at their border, they were just jailing people. And so it was a really weird time to like be like alive, And so it's one of those times where you're like, I'm not really sure if this is like the best decision, but I think it's one of the only decisions. So
yeah, it's weird when travel gets restricted or like just out of, you don't feel comfortable doing it. I remember driving back and forth between Indiana and Michigan in, I don't know, 2020 sometime, and nobody was on I don't remember the time frame exactly, but nobody was really on the roads at the time. It wasn't, illegal to be out or anything, but I was going back and forth and just thinking like how weird it is in this time in general. Like there's probably never ever been a time more, in recent history where like the highways are just vacant for whatever reason, right? It's kind of creepy.
yeah, it is creepy.
All right. Question number 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
I would say to be, and this was something we were talking about earlier, and something that's really kind of a big part of my own personal path, but to be a sovereign, to be, someone that's honorable, someone that, and I mentioned this earlier, but, a man that protects their family, that someone that's willing to to kind of do what it takes, kind of like, heroes in a house fire, pulling people out of a house fire or whatever, but obviously far more beyond that. I guess I'll stick with essentially, like I said, like being a sovereign, essentially someone who not only raises themselves up, but through that, they're inspired to lift others, and whatever that may be. So yeah, I would say, to be very much, so like normal, to be like noble and honorable and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you brought up the protector thing. It made me think of the warrior archetype and how the warrior provide protection for, outside, right? The outside 3D realm, but a warrior also has to do the shadow work inside. And that's, that's also protecting, right? So
totally
love it. Great answer. Do you have a few moments for some bonus questions, perhaps?
Sure.
Like we can get a couple in here. We have a pool that we pull from occasionally. They have been questions that have been used on the show in the past. So if any of these are new to any of our listeners, you can check out previous episodes. Any feedback would be appreciated if you want to hear them in the regular lineup too. But here's our first bonus question. What are you most curious about? Probably
one of the most common things that many other people would probably say too. Is just kind of like progress in the future, and just kind of like the great unknown and things like that.
Right, just seeing where everything's going to end up.
It's like building a life in a world where you're like, well, it kind of feels like, and I'm not a nihilist, or really don't even consider myself a negative person or pessimistic or anything, but just kind of like just thinking about like building a life and continuing on living in a world where it's like at any moment some madman could just kind of blow us all up, and it would just be, it would be one asshole against everyone else. And it's, I guess, just to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about what things will change, what's going to stick around and what won't, what that'll look like. It's
Yeah, definitely.
What daily habits or rituals do you have?
I would definitely say a lot of introspection, probably be pretty, even when I'm doing an activity, is probably a pretty big part of my day. Just kind of like, I'm a big, kind of like silent, ponderer, someone that I'll just kind of sit, sometime when I'm not engaging in any kind of work, and just kind of like look deep within myself and my memories, or like kind of into the universe, and just kind of wondrous about all of it and everything like that. And I think, that's something, that helps me kind of cultivate hope. It's something that kind of keeps me inspired. It's something that keeps me looking forward to like the next exciting adventure, the next thing. So I would definitely say, introspection and not even really much as like meditation, but just kind of being willing to be vulnerable and look within, and to kind of hold space for myself.
Kind of hold, so you take the meditation and kind of extend it out throughout the day then, right? Being the observer, able to introspect like what's going on with the outer aspects of yourself, right?
Yeah, I find in our world now, especially in the West or in the modern world, we're at least some, and that's something that I'm constantly working, and I feel like I'm breaking out of. But when you don't work for yourself and you're working a 9 to 5 and it's like people are just in the rat race, and you begin to look back, when you realize what the day or date is, and you're like, wow, like last month felt like a day, and like I feel like we get on this wheel, and it's like even our perception of time and our reality, and it is kind of like how people will say time flies, or and I feel like even your perception of that can change. But I feel like in our world, sometimes it can be difficult for people to have that downtime to just breathe and kind of decompress, and have that space to feel safe enough to look within, or want to kind of like let some of the baggage kind of like take a look at an inventory of things, and just kind of see what comes up.
So here's a question out of left field, I guess. When in meditation, since we're slowing down time, is that kind of tied to Saturn, and because we're kind of playing with that archetype of taking a moment, right? They always say take a moment, right? So we're talking about time. Is that something that you've, I don't know, made a connection to or can speak about? Or have any
So I would definitely say you could totally work with Saturn for basically time magic. Time's a weird thing because it's one of those things that is and isn't, and it is because we believe it is, and then through that, and at least in my own belief, and so it's one of those things that just really we're the only ones that are basically watching the clock, and animals aren't out there. There's not a fish with a watch that's like, oh, it's 9 p.m. And so we're the only ones that continue to kind of like count down time and fear death through that and all these other things. And so I feel like you can definitely do magic, and it is a force, but I find that through shamanic work with specific powers, like you were saying with Saturn, there are ways of shifting that or changing that or turning it in our favor. I think that we're kind of at all times in connection with like other timelines, other selves, other times, and things like that. And so there's a connection and ways to benefit through magic with that as well. So I think Saturn's definitely like a great power for that. And definitely like kind of mastering time, in essence, like helping someone. Like it may not even be as much like, oh, like I have a timekeeper like from Harry Potter in my pocket and I can like do this, but more so like helping someone master themselves on such a level that they are just wicked great with like time management and all that kind of stuff, to where they can reduce the amount that it takes to say do like a task to like a much shorter duration or time period, and all those things like that. So
since here's another left field question. Since Saturn's like related to lead, like would it help to have like a piece of lead around for when you're working on that aspect, I guess? Like maybe set up your altar.
Really wouldn't hurt. I'm a big fan of sympathetic magic, and so I would say that probably something in that way you could probably basically bind time, like create some kind of vessel or a trap with like a bit of lead. There's probably like a nice workaround there, but essentially like some kind of box that would bind the very current or spirit of time, or something, essentially like calling up, the four kings, the goetic spirits, and commanding them, or should that go as far, utilizing one of the prayers or curses against them to make them appear and do as you did, either working with the spirit or power of time, or the very current or essence or form or whatever. Sure, there's ways that you could certainly do that.
Super interesting. I got one more bonus question for you, and then we'll do plugs so everybody can find out how to work with you again. If you could give one sentence of advice to future generations, what would it be?
I would honestly say, and it sounds like one of those like new agey things, but just honestly be mindful. I feel like in our day-to-day world that we kind of can lose touch with ourselves, with the world, with our environment, with kind of everything. And so I think kind of being mindful and it's more than even being like in the moment and being present and all that, but being kind of taking it all in and seeing our impact and seeing that it's like every some mundane decision that we make could directly or indirectly have vast effects, on other people, on the world. And so like being mindful, being aware, having clarity and things like that. I think that's something that's really important, because I feel like in a lot of ways that's been the downfall and some of the issues, some of the kind of reasons that the world is in some of the places that we are nowadays, with like the age of industry, like they just thought that, or didn't even think or conceive or have the scientific understanding or whatever at the time, that all these factories all over the world that are putting off all this exhaust and burning chemicals and all this stuff was going to basically like destroy atmospheres and cause other issues down the road, so.
Yeah, definitely good piece of advice in my opinion. Be mindful, more mindfulness. Absolutely. All right. Well, Adam Darkley, thank you for carving out some time to spend with us on Saturday. Look how that worked out.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Please let the listeners know where they could find you.
Cool. And so you can actually find we have a link tree to kind of link, everything for the time being. It's LinkTree Darkleys Inc. That's DarklysInc. You can find Devil's Conjure on Facebook and Instagram, and at devilsconjure.equid. That's ecwid.com. You can find, Speak of the Devil. We, update and post on Instagram, and we have our YouTube channel and a new show every Saturday. We're actually, in just a matter of hours, going to release our show for today. This week, it's going to be a great show. And we have it's only getting better from here. We have a whole lot of plans. As I said, Darkley's School of Witchcraft launches in October later this year. It's going to be legendary. And beyond that, you can always, like, follow, and subscribe to YouTube, Devil's Conjure. Always keeping up to date on Instagram. So
awesome. Yeah, we will have all those links in the show notes for the listeners. And
yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Adam, truly.
Thank you. Of course. It's my pleasure.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians, and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't wanna why? 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 I don't wanna why?
Why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I don't wanna I don't wanna why? 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 I don't wanna why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.